Hi folks, I hope all of you are having a great week so far. In this lecture I'm going to be talking to you about one of my favorite topics, and that is doing academic research. Go ahead and call me a nerd, but the years that I've spent in this business, both as a professional and as a student, I genuinely love doing research, or as I like to think of it, confronting the great mystery, because there's so many wonderful outlets for information and gathering information that exist now that didn't exist or were seldom used even 20 years ago. You know, when I first started, around the time when I first started in college, that it's really a wonderful gift that we all have now, the ability to acquire large sums of information in a fairly rapid period of time if you're experienced in doing that. So, ultimately, doing good research requires patience and practice, even though if you're lucky you can get lucky and find some information quickly. But the goal of this lecture then is to just give you an overview of what some of the tools are for finding good information for the papers that you would write in this class or any other that require you to actually dig up information outside of your textbook or lecture notes, whatever the case might be. So, having said that, here's the list of things that I'm going to cover in this lecture. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the different types of sources. I'm going to boil that down as much as I can. I want to keep it simple, and I want you to understand that you can do this, even if you've never had to do, high-level academic research before. Give yourself some time, be patient, you can do it. I'm also going to talk to you about where to look for that good information, what kind of approach to use when you're looking for good sources and good material, how to know if a source is good, and then finally I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that you should try to avoid when doing, high-level academic research. So, first and foremost, the types of sources. There are a couple different ways of looking at this issue, but I'm going to boil it down to two types: primary sources or secondary sources. Primary source we can think of as an original intellectual or creative work. An example of this would be the movie or film The Godfather, or another example would be the movie or film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Again, those are original, if you will, first-hand intellectual or creative products or works. Secondary sources, though, the way that we can think about them is a secondary source is anything that's written about a primary source. So an example, using the couple examples that I gave you for primary sources, examples of a secondary source would be an essay about the film or book The Godfather, or a review of the book or film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Again, at this point, when we're talking about secondary sources, we're not talking about original or intellectual creative products. Instead, we're talking about something that's been written about a primary source. Okay? Next, here's where it can get a little bit heavy, but again, just be patient. And as always, if you need help, contact me, or for reasons that we'll discuss in a moment, contact your local librarian, whether it's at Terra State Community College. They're, a wonderful resource, terrific people. They're great at helping with research, but I'm getting a little off target. First, the best place for you to look for academic source material is an actual academic library. Now, when you go to a small local college like Terra or BJSU Firelands or Lorain County Community College, their individual libraries that are physically there on campus are going to be kind of small compared to the libraries that you would see at a campus, a full-blown, main campus like Kent State University, my alma mater, by the way. Love it there. And if any of you go there later on, I'm sure you'll love it too. Or, Ohio State probably has the single best library of all the public universities here in Ohio. All of these places, though, even if your local university library isn't that big, the great thing about being in Ohio, one of the really wonderful advantages that we have over most other states in this country, is that the vast majority of universities here in the state of Ohio, they have collectively pooled their resources as part of what is known as the OhioLink system. So, if you're a student or faculty member at a participating library like here at Terra, you then, once you can authenticate that you're in fact a Terra student, you then have the ability to search the entire OhioLink catalog for things like books, DVDs, all sorts of audio-visual materials, basically anything besides journal articles or periodicals you would get through OhioLink. Now, there is a way to get those kind of materials as well, and I'm going to talk to you about that shortly. But again, OhioLink is a terrific resource. In the module where this lecture is located, there should be a link to a library tutorial that's published by the librarians here at Terra. When you're done listening to this lecture and watching it, go to that link in the library tutorial. That'll give you some information on how to use both the OhioLink system for books, DVDs, other audio visual materials. You can even get streaming movies and audio through OhioLink. It's a really wonderful service. But that tutorial, I just ate lunch, so pardon my momentary burp there. But that tutorial is also going to show you how to use your status as a Terra student to do research for periodicals and academic journal articles through what's known as the research databases. Okay? So that tutorial is going to give you a little bit more hands-on info on that. But if after, watching this lecture and going through that tutorial, if you're still, not feeling sure about that, which, you're new to it, so there's probably going to be a little doubt in your heads, and that's okay. But if you do need more help, again, contact one of the librarians or myself. Moving away from university libraries, the internet, as long as you're very careful about, how you select your sources from the internet, can be a very powerful tool and a very good tool for you to use. So, in a little bit here toward the end of this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about some of the things to avoid when you're doing research on the internet, and hopefully that'll give you a better idea of how to weed out some of the good versus bad info that you might potentially include in one of your papers. Local public libraries can also be a good resource. Now, believe me, I love our public libraries here in Ohio, especially the ones in this area, because most of the libraries in this area participate in what's known as the CleveNet system. So again, it's sort of that co-op approach to library resources. So local libraries can be wonderful as well. The only problem with academic libraries versus public libraries is this. Academic /university libraries are their target audience includes university students and university professionals, whether instructors or professors, regardless of where you're at on this sort of chain of command, or a dean if you want to go all the way up the ladder. But that select group of people is the target audience for a university library. However, local libraries, the way that they're different, and the way that they're, in some ways more challenged, if you will, than a university library, is that the target audience for a local library really runs the gamut from little tots, if you will, the Jills and Jack and Jills of the world, to use that old cliche, who are just starting to learn to read, all the way up to the old-timers. I'm trying to think of a good old-timer name. How about Wilbur and Esther, who have known how to read, obviously, for years, and now just love to go to the library so that they can relax and complain about whippersnappers, who for them can be anyone probably up to the age of 30. So, even though I joke a little bit about that range, that's why, using a local library for academic research can be a little more difficult, because they're not going to have that more select pool of information that we tend to look for when you're either writing papers like you folks are doing, or grading papers like I have to do for my job. So again, I love local libraries and local librarians. They're a wonderful resource, but be aware that because they have that larger target audience, they might not be able to help you quite as well, at least, in a quick sort of manner, as a university library would. Personal interviews. As someone who, many years ago worked as a journalist, I'm all for, the idea, at least, of including personal interviews in your essays. But if you're gonna do that, you have to make sure that your source is a very reputable person on whatever your topic is. So, for instance, if you were to write about a paper about cancer and how it can either be treated or on a qualitative sort of approach, how it affects people's lives, if you or someone in your family or a friend who you know well has gone through cancer and had to go through those, treatments that oftentimes can be very hard on the body and so forth. If you want to interview them, great. If they're willing to share that, I think that's a wonderful resource. But say, for instance, you wanted to write that same paper on cancer, but instead of talking with someone who's living with cancer now, or is considered a cancer survivor, someone who had it in the past and is either in remission or considered completely cured. If the person that you're interviewing doesn't have that kind of first-hand ability to really speak to how cancer changed their lives, then they probably wouldn't be a good source. Say a while back, another example of that poor idea of a personal interview as a source was that I had a student who wanted to write a paper about the popularity of what were known as muscle cars from the mid-70s to the mid-80s, ending with the late great Trans Am. But instead of talking about someone like a mechanic or perhaps an auto dealer who had a really strong first-hand knowledge of the popularity of that kind of automobile, the student instead just talked to their uncle because they liked the cars a lot. Well, just because you like those kind of cars doesn't make you an expert, okay? So, personal interviews can be good, but just, again, be sure that your source is credible. A newer outlet for information that I've recently become a big fan of is Google Scholar. Through Google Scholar, you can get many of the same source materials that you would through the research databases, and you would cite it basically as if it was a research database on your Works Cited page. But the nice thing about Google Scholar that I really love is that it's made that kind of high quality information available to the general public. So you don't need to be a university employee like myself or a student like yourselves to have access to that information. So Google Scholar, again, I wholeheartedly endorse it. Use it, you might need to play around with your search terms, but, it can give you some really good results. Once you decided where you're going to look for your sources, whether you're going to use a university library, a public library, the internet, Google Scholar, or what have you, you really need to have a plan in mind as far as how you're going to approach the actual search itself. Now, there are a couple different ways that I recommend thinking about that. One of the ways that I think students sometimes handcuff themselves when they do research, whether it's through OhioLink, the research databases, or Google Scholar, is that they will start out with plugging in search terms that are very, very specific right off the bat, and while they'll still probably get some results, they might not get a really good overview of the debate that is surrounding whatever topic that they're trying to write about. So for that reason, when you start the actual process of your research, one of the ways that I recommend going about it, at least initially, is starting out with rather broad search terms. So, for instance, if you wanted to do a paper at some point in your academic career on the contemporary immigration debate, rather than just starting off with that, you might be better off to just start off with a topic like immigration or immigration in America, and starting out broad, and then as you begin to weed through the information, then, as you move along, narrow it down as you go. But start out broad. I think you'll end up getting better results that way. In my experience, it's definitely been the case. So I just want to share that bit of advice with all of you. Another example of that whole starting broad idea would be if you wanted to do a paper where you were to analyze the popularity of a certain musical artist or performer. Before you start out by just talking about the popularity of that musical artist as an individual entity, maybe do a little background research first on the larger popularity or influential groups within that genre of music. So, just as an example, my all-time favorite band to this day is probably still the old band Led Zeppelin that started out in the late 60s and then remained popular through the 70s before the drummer John Bonham unfortunately died in the early 80s. So, if I were going to write a paper about them, as much as I love them and eventually would want to focus on them in the paper, as I'm starting out the research, maybe just instead of kind of hammering in on Led Zeppelin right away, I would probably want to start out with the popularity of like what could be called hard rock or classic rock, because I think that either of those labels definitely fit that band. So again, start broad, and then as you move along, then you can narrow down your terminology and the kind of sources that you eventually use. Now, another method, another couple ways that you can think about the methods of research are what I like to call the linear approach to research or the recursive approach to research. Now, the linear approach would be if you were to go to an outlet like Google Scholar or something like that, or OhioLink or one of the research databases, and type in your search term what you want to learn about. The linear approach would be to simply just go through the source as they're listed by that outlet and begin evaluating, do I want this one, do I not want that one, so on and so forth. That would be the linear or one to the next sort of a research approach. The other approach that I've become really, I think, a bigger fan of as I've gone through the years of being in this business is what I like to call the recursive approach to academic research. And what that means is when you start doing your research, eventually, regardless of what your topic is, you're probably gonna find that there are one or two sources that are considered must-reads when it comes to understanding that topic and the debate that surrounds it. So the recursive approach involves first finding out what those highly important, or what's sometimes called canonical, sources are. And then once you know what those highly important sources are, you not only get that source, but you look at the bibliography or the works cited pages that are included in that work, and you look and say, okay, what source material did the originator of this source use to build that work? And then you kind of confront the mystery, if we can come back to that expression for a moment, by finding that canonical source and then looking up the sources that author or authors used to build their work. Because then, in a neat sort of detective sort of way, in some ways, you're not just doing your research there, but you're putting yourself literally in the footpaths of the person who created that highly important work. Okay, knowing if a source is good. Particularly when you use, more modern tools like the internet or OhioLink or the research databases. More often than not, especially if you've asked for help from someone like myself or a librarian, more often than not, the problem that you're going to face is that when you type in your search terms, you'll get hundreds or even thousands of results. So particularly in a course like this, where everything is condensed, I realize that, as part of your research, you're not going to have the time to read hundreds, let alone thousands of sources. So, to quickly find out if a source is good, first off, as sophomoric as this might sound, pay attention to the titles of your sources. Professors, or if you like to think of us perhaps simply as underpaid nerds like myself, spend a lot of time thinking about what titles we're going to attach to our sources, to our work. Because a good title should always do two things. It should let the reader know what you're going to be writing about, what your topic is, okay? And it should also, and will oftentimes, foreshadow what you're going to argue in relation to that topic. And that's why many academic sources will use a title and subtitle format. The main title will show the topic, and the subtitle will, in some small way, foreshadow the argument. So, for instance, if you were to do research on George Washington, and the main title of the book is simply George Washington, subtitle is An American Hero, you know then that the author of that work is going to have a sort of a a pro-Washington mindset. However, if you find another book on George Washington that is like George Washington, the Great Liar, or anything like that, you know that person is going to have sort of an anti-Washington point that they're going to want to get across. So pay attention to titles. Now, pay attention to the opening of works. If you're dealing with the shorter work, like an essay, read the introduction, or if one's available, read the abstract. The abstract is just a quick summary of journal articles, mainly is what you find those attached to. Introductions will also give you some kind of overview of what the author is going to try and present through that work. So that would save you, again, the time of having to read the whole work right off the bat and, wondering, is this going to be a value to me or not? So pay attention to the introductions, for short works like essays or things like that. Or also, if you're dealing with longer works, look at the introduction or the preface and the first few chapters. Again, give yourself a good idea of what the book is going to be about before you invest a lot of time in reading the whole gosh darn thing. Okay, what to avoid? The big thing that when, you start doing, research for this course and what other professors are going to look for as well, is that you don't just do research that confirms your, personal view or bias about a topic. So we don't want to overly slant our research or do what's sometimes called me-search. By the way, I hope none of you are bothered by the thunder in the background there, but as has often been the case, my home is getting nailed by a very powerful thunderstorm at the moment, so hang with me though, unless there's tornado sirens, which I don't think there will be. I'm not going to cut this short, especially since we're almost done. But again, as you're doing your research, it's fine to look for sources that are going to support your argument. That's always going to be part of the process, and that's okay. But don't only look for those kind of sources. Look for the sources that are going to be about your topic, but present an alternate argument or point of view, or what I usually refer to as counter arguments. So be sure when you're doing your research that you present your reader with sources that not only support your views, but give them a broad idea of what other people argue in relation to whatever your topic is. So, the internet, as I mentioned earlier, if you're careful about it, can be a very good and powerful outlet for, information. But the problem with the internet is because everyone has the ability to potentially post anything that they want on the internet with not much mediation or screening, whatever word you want to use. The internet can also be a big problem because there's a lot of bad, information that's still floating around out there. So here are some things that I want you to avoid or be very cautious about when it comes to internet research. Be cautious about blogs. blogs can be a very good resource to reference as long as you can validate the credentials of the person that is either doing most of the posting on that blog or moderating the blog that other people are posting in. So, if you wanted to do a medical related topic and wanted to use, a doctor's blog, do a little bit of research to make sure that the doctor who's hosting the blog is actually a board certified doctor and not just some infomercial host that only pops up and pretends to have credibility with people at 3 o'clock in the morning, selling ridiculous miracle cures for cancer or arthritis or whatever else the case might be. So, I'm not saying rule out blogs, but be careful. Wikipedia. Here's the deal with Wikipedia, folks. If you want to look at it to get ideas about your topic and what you might want to use for a topic, so to find your topic and to do some initial sort of giving yourself an idea of what the debate it is or would be, I'm fine with that. But ultimately, I don't want to see you use Wikipedia as a source for your remaining essays in this course, especially the last one, okay? Because the problem with Wikipedia is what I like to call truth by democracy. Anyone can potentially post anything they want on Wikipedia, and if enough people agree to it, then that item will be, presented to you as the audience as a fact. So, if someone could write an article saying that Indian elephants have three ears, okay? And if enough people agree to that, then, by golly, it's going to be presented to you as a fact. Now, the problem is the bad information with Wikipedia is never going to be as obvious as the example that I just gave you. Now, to Wikipedia's credit, even within the decade that I've been teaching, they are getting a lot better about at least warning readers about when they go on to a particular Wikipedia page, when the information might be dicey or not trustworthy, but they still leave it up there anyway. So, I applaud the fact that they do that much, but again, what are they doing there? Who are they really helping by saying, oh, by the way, this might be bad, but we're still going to let you read it anyway. So again, no Wikipedia ultimately as a source. If you want to use it as a jumping off point to your research, that's fine. Same thing, I'm going to skip an item temporarily on my list here. I recently, when I started working with Terra a few years ago, I had never known, I had heard of this website before, but I had never really seen it used in essays. But I'm also not a fan of the website procon.org, because although it is possible to get some good information from them, the information that you get from them tends to be very shallow, to be quite honest with you. It doesn't really give you an in-depth representation of the debate that they've suggested that they're trying to present to you. So, kind of like I just said with Wikipedia, if you want to use it as a jumping off point to your research, to give you an idea ultimately of what that debate is going to be, what all people are saying about that topic, that's fine. But then I'm going to expect you to go a little deeper and find that more detailed information and be aware of the details that really underline or make up that debate. Don't just give me a procon.org source and leave it at that. I'm going to want to see that you've gone beyond that. So, again, to recap, you can use Wikipedia and procon.org as jumping off points to your research, but ultimately I don't want to see you use either of those websites as sources in your papers. If I see either of them, I'll probably, at a minimum, dock you a letter grade on that paper. If I think that you've depended on them for most of your paper, especially now that you've been warned, I might just go ahead and give you a failing grade and move on. Okay? So that's kind of, how I feel about it. It might seem strict or whatever, but, I'm just trying to put you on the path, if you will, to the best possible information that's going to help you produce the best possible papers. So, I'm going to move up one item on my list there and talk to you about .com websites. .com websites I put in the same category as blogs. I'm not saying rule them out entirely, but be careful. Because remember this, the .com and .com websites always stands for commercial. Because many of us have grown up with the internet now. We're so familiar with that .com label that we don't even really think anymore about what that means. But the .com always stands for commercial, meaning that ultimately the goal of that website is going to be to sell you a product or service of some sort. So, for that reason, as far as doing internet research, you'd probably be better going off using a .org website like PBS.org has a wealth of wonderful information. EDU websites, websites most commonly tied with a university are wonderful. .gov website for, statistics related to government stuff can be very good as well. But .com, because there's always going to be that ulterior motive, of what is this person or group or company trying to sell me, you've really got to approach them somewhat carefully. Now, again, I'm not saying in the case of .coms that we need to rule them out altogether. For instance, History.com, the website for the History Channel, which many people have access to on their TV lineups. HistoryChannel.com has a lot of good, reliable historical information. So I would be, just as an example, completely fine with that if you were to use that as a source in your paper. But again, be careful about .coms. Okay? And finally, as we close things out, as I've said multiple times in this lecture, if you need help, contact me or a librarian. That's what we're here for. We want to help you. We want to see you do well. But just, be willing to reach out to either myself or a librarian. And if you really do need a lot of help, be sure to contact us in enough time that we would actually be able to help you. So obviously, if you're doing a research paper, don't wait till, just a day or two before it's due to contact either, your instructor or the librarian. It's gonna take some time, but, if you delegate your time well, I think you'll find that doing academic research in and of itself can be a very rewarding and, I dare say, enjoyable experience. So, until next time, folks, have a great evening, and if you need anything, just let me know. I'm here to help. Take care, and I'm going to back out of this and try to look cool in the process. It's probably not going to work, but I'm trying. So I'm going to end in 3, 2, and 1.